Hello and welcome to the Begin Within YouTube channel. This show is all about your personal and professional growth. I'm your host, Jamie, and this episode will introduce Begin Within and teach you how to introduce yourself. Now that I've introduced Begin Within, I'll move along and teach you how to introduce yourself. This seems like a simple concept, but it can be a little bit tricky. So the two main concepts of this episode are 1, the elevator pitch, and 2, the punchline. So first, I'm going to talk about the elevator pitch. The name, as it sounds like, comes from the idea that you are riding in an elevator and you turn around and you introduce yourself to the person next to you in the elevator within the time frame that the elevator goes from point A to point B and the doors open. That would be about 30 seconds. And God forbid that you are stuck in an elevator for longer than about 30 seconds. If you practice it at home for a job interview, usually you get a little bit nervous, and in the job interview, it can be about a minute long. There are primarily 2 different settings that you can use an elevator pitch. The first setting is, just as I said, a formal job interview. The second place is more casual. It would be, for instance, if you were at a business conference or at some kind of a meetup or a networking event. First, I'll go in depth about job interviews, talk about how to create the elevator pitch, and then after that, I will talk about modifying that elevator pitch to use in more casual settings. So for a job interview, you almost always start out with one question. So, tell me about yourself, or some variation of it. This question can be good or evil. The good side is that it lightens the mood, it breaks the ice, it gets you talking even when you are nervous, and you might even ease into a stuffy interview with the interviewer being nervous as well. The evil part of it is that interviews are judge, jury, and executioner. And so no matter how your elevator pitch goes, if you practiced for it or not, if you didn't know what they were going to ask you or not, this question could rule you out for the job entirely. I've done a lot of interviews in my day, and I can tell right up front if that person prepared for their interview or not based on their answer to tell me about yourself. I happen to think it's one of the more difficult questions to actually answer because it might be one of few open-ended questions you get in the interview, and the spotlight's right on you. It's all about you. So what are you going to say? Your elevator pitch needs to be a summary, a quick snapshot of your experience, and the value that you add. Half of creating a good elevator pitch for a job interview is doing your research. What I mean by that is typically, unless you're at a job fair where there are lots of companies interviewing lots of people, generally your interview is you interviewing for a company, one-on-one, right? And if you're interviewing for a company, what I mean by do your research is research that company and research their pain. What I mean by pain is how can you save them money? How can you alleviate a pain or a burden that they have? How can you save them man hours? What problems do they have that you have the unique skills that you can solve for them? The other half is understanding your value and how you can use that value to help others. So 1, do your research. 2, understand your value and how you can use it for that company to help them with their mission, whatever the company's mission is. So this is the good news, is that, yay, you know how to do an elevator pitch now, but whoa, every single time that you interview for a new job, this elevator pitch should be different. It should be tailor-made for each job that you interview for. I recommend practicing for only a 30-second elevator pitch. Like I said a little bit earlier, if you practice for 30 seconds, when you're actually nervous, it could get as long as a minute. It usually will go a little bit slower, unless you're a speed talker and you start just chatterboxing really fast as soon as you get nervous. The best way to nail the elevator pitch is to research the company, demonstrate how you add value, and then practice it. Practice it, but don't memorize it. It's a conceptualization. Don't memorize, conceptualize. This needs to be a professional story. This is not a good time to say, my name is Jamie and I moved here because I'm a military spouse and I came here with my husband. We don't want to know that. I asked you to tell me about yourself, and I don't need to know about any of your hobbies or your pets, how many children you have, or your spouse. It needs to be professional. Usually, that is the telltale sign when you haven't prepared and you start telling me about your actual life story instead of your career in a quick summary. You get nervous and you ramble and you're like, I'm Jamie and I moved here because I'm a military spouse. Whoa, I just lost that job. So I'm going to read an example elevator pitch. I've worked for a decade as a supervisory project manager in the defense contracting industry. I admire companies who encourage professional development in their employees. An ABC company is well known for doing that, but has a high turnover among its young employees. My specialty is developing and mentoring young talent so they stick around and learn to be successful in the contracting industry. So to break that down, there's only one sentence of background there. I've worked for a decade as a supervisory project manager in the defense contracting industry. The rest of that is all about the company. I admire companies who encourage professional development. ABC company does that. But you have a high turnover. My specialty happens to be developing young talent and making them stick around for the long term, right? So that captures what I was talking about. You briefly explained kind of your career summary, and you explained your specialization and how that specialization alleviates the pain of ABC company. That was the formal version. This is where you know the company that you need to research, and you have came up with a way to alleviate their pain. Now let's flip the coin. You may have to use this in a more casual setting. Let's pretend that you are at a business conference. Let's just close our eyes and visualize for a second. You're at a trade conference. Let's say you're real estate, if you're a lawyer, if you're cybersecurity. We're going to go with cybersecurity. You are at a cybersecurity conference. You've worked for a decade in cybersecurity, and you're sitting in a breakout session with 15 other people. You're all sitting in a circle in the room and you're looking at each other. And the facilitator of the breakout session says, okay, stand up, say your name, and tell us what you do. Hello, they're just asking for your elevator pitch, which you will have prepared in advance. Unfortunately, for a conference like this, you can't research every single professional that's going to be there. You can't research all the companies that will be there. So your best bet is to make this elevator pitch specific to you and what you specialize in. It seems counterintuitive, like you would want to make it as broad and generic as possible. But the best way to make quality connections that might have some potential later is to be specific and to stick with your niche. So obviously you want to be able to stand up in your circle at this cybersecurity conference and sound polished and professional. But again, you don't want to memorize. You're not going to have time to research everybody's companies, all their companies' pains, and come up with a magical solution and tell it to them in 10 seconds. At a networking event, keep your niche, tell them what your specialization is, and then hopefully that will result in fruitful connections. What you might say instead of the whole spiel that we said earlier, my specialty is developing and mentoring young talent so they stick around and learn to be successful in the IT field. See, it's the same pitch, you have the same specialty, but instead of talking directly to ABC company and saying ABC company has a young employee turnover, you're saying I evaluate companies with a high turnover. My specialty is mentoring young talent. So it's still specific, it still says what your specialty is, and at a casual event like that, if it sparks interest with someone, it could be a very fruitful connection. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the punchline. The punchline is our last topic of the day. The punchline is basically the speed dating version of an elevator pitch. It's direct, it's simple, it's bottom line upfront. But the problem is that it's really tough to narrow down your career experience into one sentence. So it's going to be hard when you're sitting here thinking about all those things that you do for 8+ hours every day at work and narrow it down into one sentence. It's a simple formula. Who you are, what you do, and why you do it. Who you are is easy. That's your name. Cool, we've got that one down. What do I do? This is not your job title. Please, dear Lord, do not use your job title. 1, who you are. That is so easy. That is your name. Hi, I'm Jamie Chapman. What do you do, Jamie? I'm a career and personal development expert. Why do you do it? I help veterans and military spouses find stable employment. So let's wrap that up and make it into a fine, polished sentence. I'm shaking someone's hand at a conference, and they say, "Hi, my name is Bill." "Hi, my name is Jamie Chapman." What do you do, Jamie? I'm a personal and career development expert. I help veterans and military spouses find stable employment. What do you do? That's simple. Your punchline is the toughest one probably to come up with because you have to figure out of all of those millions of things that you do every day at work, what's the most important? What's the purpose? What's the punchline? This line is designed to be a teaser. You want it to be attention grabbing, but be clear. You don't want to confuse anybody. And if it works, they're going to say, "Oh, wow, can you tell me more about that?" And there's your conversation starter. So we have discussed a little bit about Begin Within and what we do. We introduced ourselves. I taught you how to introduce yourself with an elevator pitch and with a punchline. They're both used very differently and in very different situations, but the purpose is the same. You want to introduce yourself to someone, and you don't want to sound like a blubbering fool. Trust me, I've done that and I've been there, and there's a reason that I'm talking about it today. So you want your first impression to be great, and you want it to be a lasting positive impression. Half the battle is introducing yourself in a professional way. So thank you for watching today. I appreciate your viewership. Out of all the other videos today that you could have watched, you chose Begin Within, and I appreciate that. I would love to answer any questions that you may have or hear your feedback, especially if you want to hear about different topics coming up in the future. I have a whole list coming up of things that I would like to talk about, personal and career development topics. And if you liked the show, please subscribe to the Begin Within YouTube channel. You can also find podcast episodes, videos, and the blog online at www.beginwithin.life. Thank you for watching.